addressing today the topic of huge global importance. Now, Mr. Kirschenbaum, please.
Mr. Chairman and esteemed members, thank you for the invitation to this important hearing. I'm honored to appear before your committee today. Illicit financial activity emanating from Russia and the CIS is an issue that deserves to be high on the bilateral American-European agenda. Recent years have witnessed a profusion of money laundering scandals at European banks. The common themes have been billions of dollars laundered through one single institution in a given case, frequently with ties to Russia and the CIS, the imposition of lackluster fines, and a relative absence of criminal prosecutions. Even when such schemes may have the immediate goal of facilitating corruption or criminality over there, such as in Russia, toleration of such activity inside the EU creates risks here at home. Professional facilitation networks that control opaque financial channels that may be used for relatively benign purposes, such as capital flight, will happily offer their services to actors engaged in political interference in European Union member states. Allowing banks and others to develop a business dependent on opaque or illicit money from the CIS also risks establishing a domestic constituency here in an EU member state that is likely to be amenable to Russian political or economic influence. Concerns about Russian influence today may also in the future be replaced by unforeseen geopolitical threats and concerns about the influence of other actors that we cannot yet predict. These scandals that I referred to have often, but not always, been concentrated in the smaller EU member states that have developed large non-resident or offshore banking sectors. I would argue that AML supervision has been inadequate in countries that meet that profile, such as Cyprus or Latvia, and which have been the most prominent in this business, but that the problem seems to be larger than that. And I believe the activity has festered because of weak European Union enforcement of strong laws on the books. A system in which financial institutions are fined merely a few million euros for illicit activity in the billions of euros is destined to fail. Exacerbating the problem of weak enforcement, AML supervision is a national responsibility tasked to the national competent authorities of member states, while the licensing of banks, fit and proper checks of management and board members, the approval of qualifying holding acquisitions in banks is the remit of the European Central Bank within the single supervisory mechanism and the Eurozone. And even more broadly, financial services are passported across the entire EU and single market. Now, it may be possible to tackle this problem country by country, but I support and agree with the position of Daniel Nouy of the SSM and of Benoit Cœuré of the ECB board, and I support the creation of a central European Union authority focused exclusively on anti-money laundering supervision, as I've discussed at greater length in the paper the chairman referenced at the outset with my colleague Nicolas Varone of Bruegel. This centralized agency should oversee and supervise both banks and non-bank financial institutions across the entire single market, and it should be independent, develop unique expertise, and apply aggressive proactive enforcement throughout the EU. Of course, many day-to-day tasks should be redelegated back to national competent authorities who should work closely with the central agency. And this empowered central agency, I believe, would be more proactive, more politically independent, and develop real superiority in this area, using data, exchanging information with other supervisors, and issuing large fines that would deter bad activity. It should also publicize its findings. Many European Union member state national competent authorities have not actually publicized the reason behind their fines, or in some cases even the existence of fines. It can also use other authorities to restrict business operations or impose management and ownership changes. All of these things could be done under the existing framework, but I believe are more likely to occur with the central agency. Banks, of course, do play a unique role in the financial system, and Nicolas Varone and I focused on the role of banks. I would argue that they are a pressing concern, but not the only challenge to financial supervision. With the rise of fintech, financial technology, cross-border payments may increasingly occur outside the formal banking system, underscoring the importance of strong supervision of money transfer businesses, a problem the United States currently grapples with as well. Securities trading in stocks or bonds in the United States, in the EU, and elsewhere, is in general far less transparent than international payments executed through the banking system. Beneficial owners of securities trades are often unknown even to the institutions involved, and there's a lot of room for basic enhancements to transparency in the securities market. As ECB Vice President Luis de Guindos has warned, much activity, financial activity, has migrated from the formal banking sector to private investment funds, such as hedge funds and private equity firms, and he has warned of the systemic dangers to financial stability that may emanate from them. I believe that likewise, illicit actors may seek to embed themselves in these private investment funds, attracted by the relative opacity and relatively lighter supervisory touch. While the EU has rightly prioritized, in recent proceedings, has rightly prioritized improvements to bank supervision, there's also a need to assess the existing supervision of private investment funds and independent broker-dealers that are not part of banking groups. Fortunately, the EU does have anti-money laundering program requirements on private investment fund managers, hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital in particular, while the United States has failed to impose those requirements for 17 years, although they are required under Financial Action Task Force standards. Beyond illicit finance and money laundering risks that stem from private investment funds or securities trading, there's a broader financial and economic risk imposed by opacity of investments and financial flows. The European Union, much like the United States, does not have a good sense of who invests in it, where those investments are located, or why they were made. Governments have adopted and maintained an open investment posture, but this leaves them in a position of not knowing who owns what. I believe that this environment is conducive to state or non-state actors from authoritarian countries, such as Russia, but also including others, building up large strategic investment positions without disclosing them to supervisors, regulators, or law enforcement, leaving the governments in the dark. While the EU has recently moved to put in place more robust investment security review procedures, one can only review transactions about which one knows. More transparency of foreign direct investment and portfolio holdings will allow regulators and law enforcement to steer resources and oversight to high-value, high-priority areas that pose the greatest risk to national security. This, too, is an area in which cooperation with the U.S. and other partners will be essential. More aggressive criminal prosecution would certainly deter facilitators and bankers, but I believe that even in the most optimistic scenarios, securing convictions will remain difficult because of the nature of financial crimes. Therefore, the EU, like others, will continue to need to lean heavily on effective supervision of the financial sector. I'm grateful for the opportunity you provided me to speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you.